Now we've got to start things off here by talking about the things that inspired me when I was young. So you really understand where I'm coming from and how my style has emerged from, my influences. And it all begins with comics, unsurprisingly. So this is an awesome collection by Brian Walker called Comics: The Complete Collection. And it's just a great overview of the whole history of newspaper comics, starting with something like the Katzenjammer Kids, going into stuff like George Herman and Crazy Cat, and some of the early Popeye comics. You can see as I flip through these pages, there's such a variety of face design with comics. Sometimes it's super simple. Sometimes it's a little more rendered to create wrinkles or some of the details of the face. It all really depends on the type of narrative. And all this work stuck with me so much as a kid because I was seeing these faces and reading these expressions before I could understand the words to the story. So my earliest reading experiences were with faces. And I particularly remember sitting down with my dad and looking at something like Peanuts. And Charlie Brown is often staring right out at you, so you can really take in some of the details of his face. And the way Charles Schulz works is you can see how much just a little line change can affect an expression. So here's Charlie Brown just kind of staring blankly out at you as he listens to Linus tell a story. And then you can see this moment of realization. And it's expressed by just two little lines on each side of the eye to make the eyes look like they're kind of opening up a bit and putting the pupils into context. Looking at this work helps you see how little you need to do to evoke a reader's engagement. We're so attuned to picking up all the subtle details of a facial expression, you don't have to do a lot of work to say a lot. Now, cartooning and comics kind of go hand in hand. So while I spend a lot of time reading and looking at comics, cartooning is also a massive influence on the work I do. This is an awesome book about early Disney animation called The Illusion of Life. And something you can use to enhance the expression in a face is this concept called squash and stretch. And we'll talk a little bit more once we start our lesson. But you can see right here in this example the way Mickey's arc of emotion through the course of this little animated sequence changes based on the squashing and stretching of his face and its features. This principle is designed to evoke motion, and motion can convey expression and story and narrative. So if you can get a sense of a character squinting their eyes or elongating their face, it tells a better story. And a lot of early cartoon character face design really felt in this vein of simplicity and style. But things leveled up when Disney got to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is like next level face design. It's extremely expressive. There's a sense of squash and stretch, but there's also like another level of believability and the wrinkles and anatomy of the face. It's still simple in a way, but there's a higher sense of the physics of the world. You get a real understanding of the volume and mass of the faces of these characters. And that's something I think a lot about when I'm creating a cartoon face. I don't want them to feel light and airy. I want them to feel like they have weight and substance, even if they're really simply drawn and kind of bubbly. And of course, cartoon storytelling goes in all kinds of different directions. So if we were to just jump to another category here, we've got Alison Bechdel's. You might know her for her book, Fun Home, but through the 90s, she did a comic strip called Dykes to Watch Out For, which is just kind of a mix of op-ed, opinionated narrative about a group of friends living in kind of a Minneapolis-style town. And there's a lot of romantic kind of Victorian style drama amongst this like contemporary group of friends. And it's kind of a view into Alison Bechdel's life. You're seeing such a variety of character design. It's drawn pretty simply, but you can easily connect and see who these characters are over the course of reading this strip just based on things like their hairstyle or the shape of their nose or their lips or their jawline. All these little features that when you're reading the narrative kind of get lost, but when you sit down and look at these comics, you can see the subtle little choices that are being made by the artist to express the world of their characters. So comics are a real opportunity to get a glimpse into, somebody's life without having a camera there to capture it. Now, growing up, I ripped off a lot of the artists I love in my own style, and eventually, that grew into a style of its own. But it's always good to step back and look at how some of the masters of commercial illustration render a face. Like comics are great, but it's also stylized. You don't get a great grasp of the underlying structure or anatomy of a face. So you don't have as much control if you just focus exclusively on cartooning as a reference. So this is an awesome book by commercial artist Andrew Loomis that breaks down the structure of a face and how you can make subtle changes to the angles of it just by following some guidelines. So a totally different illustration style that can also inform a cartoonish style. Here's a look at how he grids out the construction of a head in different poses. Andrew Loomis really understood the fundamentals of face design and head construction, so he was able to play in all kinds of different stylistic realms. Like on these 2 pages here, you see 2 fairly different approaches to face design. A real simple Art Nouveau type of minimalist face, really elegant and simple. And over here, we get something with a lot more form and expression. This whole group of elves, their faces covered in little hatch marks that represent, their cheeks, the shape of their nose, the shape of their lips. So while line art is really important to my style, it's good to understand how hatching and light can be played with different pen techniques. So all these different influences come back around to really help me enjoy something like Charles Burns's Black Hole. So this has got its own vibe. It's cartoonish in that it's simple. The features are bold and very expressive, easy to read in a kind of Peanuts way. But there's an attention to detail with anatomy and perspective that really grounds the story. So it's a supernatural comic adventure, really dark, actually. But the characters feel real in that their proportions are accurate, and then we see the way he's using the surfaces of the face to reflect light. And that's something we're going to talk about towards the end of this lesson. How do we represent the surfaces of the face so they have form and dimension and feel like they're existing in this little world we've built? So once we start moving into the lessons today, think of the face designs and illustrative styles that influence you already and try to blend those with some of the techniques and advice that I'm giving you in today's class. So let's jump into our first lesson.